Trading Places, the story of a very, you know, asshole, snobbish Wall Street broker and a street hustler, and they end up switching lives. And it's Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, like like Beverly Hills Cop and Ghostbusters, and Jamie Lee Curtis gets naked in this. So, end of story. This is amazing. So, end. Okay, I'm kidding. Well, maybe not be. But so let's talk about this. So, Trading Places, that's pretty much what I just what I just described. It's pretty much the story. We got Dan Aykroyd, who plays just a snobbish Wall Street broker, and Eddie Murphy plays a street hustler. And these two millionaire brothers who run a brokerage house that Dan Aykroyd works at, they make a bet on, okay, if we switch these guys, so the hustler becomes the broker and the broker becomes the hustler, can we, do something with it? And then it just dissolves from there and becomes a not political, but it becomes satire. And yeah, that's the story of this one. So this happened after Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy were in some movies. This was pre-Ghostbusters, where originally the two of them were going to be in that, but Murphy dropped out to go do Beverly Hills Cop, which, to be frank, I think was the better career move, because that basically made him a superstar. Where Murphy had stuff like 48 Hours and SNL, and then this, where with Aykroyd had SNL as well, but also had Blues Brothers and I believe Spielberg's 1941, I believe. So they were kind of like, all right, we've established ourselves in comedy, but let's take a crack out of something like this. And it worked, because then, the next year in 84, they went off to do, stuff like Aykroyd helped write Ghostbusters, and then Eddie Murphy did Beverly Hills Cop and basically made them superstars. So I guess it all worked out. And also Curtis got, out of the horror game, because she was only known for doing horror movies at this point. So there we go. She got a career boost because of this. So I guess it all worked out. So I saw this when I was maybe 11, 12 years old, something like that. I was really getting into the habit of watching R-rated movies that maybe shouldn't have saw when I was that young. Stuff like this or The Shining. I was kind of like, no, this is what I want to watch, and then I'll suffer the consequences later. But I never really did, because I was going oh, these are good movies. So with Trading Places, I was like, all right, because I remember family had the DVD for it, and I was like, all right, I know who, Dan Aykroyd is. He's Ray from Ghostbusters, which, at this point, it's pretty well known that that's my favorite movie of all time. And Eddie Murphy, the only things I really knew him for was, I knew he was a Beverly Hills Cop, but I was mainly known for him doing Donkey. And so I was like, okay, so it's his live action stuff. Let me take a look and see what he's doing with live action. And so this was kind of my entry point to both of these guys doing different stuff than what I knew them from. And it was cool. And the top thing I'll say is their chemistry together, I think, is pretty good. And while they're very opposite each other, it's like, all right, but this works. They're actually a pretty good comedy duo. And, that it really worked. Especially since I'm like, all right, Aykroyd stuff is funny. Because I think at this point I saw Blues Brothers at the same time, or around the same time. But I was like, he's funny in Ghostbusters. And so let's see him play more of kind of a jerk. And I was like, all right, this is cool. I like this. It gives him a good acting range. And then with Eddie Murphy, like I said, I really only knew him for Donkey. So I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. So I think their chemistry together is definitely really on point. And I think the acting for almost everybody, I think I think everybody does a pretty good job. And this was directed by John Landis, who who just a couple years prior to this did American Werewolf in London, and I believe this was the same year as Twilight Zone the movie, where the on-set accident occurred. And I think after this, he didn't direct a movie for quite a while. But he did Blues Brothers with Aykroyd, so that's how they kind of roped him back into this. So I think the direction is very well done, the acting is very well done, and them kind of putting it during the Christmas season, I think was a nice touch to it as well. And yeah, I after a rewatch, I forgot how funny this movie is, because it does kind of seem like the fish out of water kind of stuff at times, because Aykroyd is so used to being this just snobbish guy that when all of it is taken away from him, he's like, I don't know what to do with my life at all. And then with Murphy, him being a street hustler, he's kind of just taking it all in, going like, oh, okay, like I guess I'll just play my cards here. So it's kind of cool to that you start the movie, the two of these guys off in completely different paths, and then they switch them, and it's like, all right, I like how this gives them the opportunity to kind of give them a bigger acting range, and that's cool. And I think with Landis's directing, I think works, because I think Landis does, while I'm not the hugest fan of some of his movies, I do think he's really good with actors. He's really, really good with that. And so it shows here. And I would say the one complaint I probably have is it does have this was me personally, this was kind of a slower type movie where, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Landis' stuff I felt is kind of slow. Like Blues Brothers, as much as I really like that movie, there are spots in there that are a little slow. So I kind of feel like I like Landis' writing a little bit more than his directing. Like he co-wrote something like Clue, but he didn't direct that one. And while I'm not, harping on Landis as a director, I think it was his stuff I've seen. There's spots in there where I'm like, okay, this was a little slow. And there were spots in here where I thought it was a little slow, where I'm like, okay, maybe like a good 10, maybe 15 minutes could have been cut and maybe reworked, maybe just to shave off a little bit of the runtime, just kind of keep it a little bit faster and a little bit going. But that's just a personal thing for me. But I still think overall, it's still funny. Aykroyd and Murphy's chemistry works really well. It would have been interesting to see if Murphy did do Ghostbusters, because originally he was going to, but then he got offered Beverly Hills Cop, so he took that one instead. And so when you see something like this, and it's like, all right, I can kind of see, something working with Ghostbusters. But sadly, that didn't happen. As much as I love Ernie Hudson, I think he killed it. This is still funny, and I wouldn't say the family friendliest Christmas movie, but it still is still funny. It's, the chemistry works, and especially the satire on how it looks at the stock brokerage industry and just how Wall Street is. So you can kind of do a 2-punch of this and American Psycho, because the whole Wall Street movie, that movie was kind of saying the whole greed is good kind of thing, where with this, it was trying to be satire to that. And it's like, no, we're basically picking this apart and laughing at it. So if you like your satire stuff, this is it. You like your Christmas stuff, there you go. And I know this sounds very mean and wrong, but we get Jamie Lee Curtis get naked in this one, so there we go. So I would give this one a great. It's not amazing to me, because I think a lot of it has to do with when Landis directs something, it's a little bit slow, and there's times where I'm like, he could have probably shaved off a little bit here and there. But, if the chemistry and the characters are written correctly, written good, which they are here, then it's a small nitpick, but it's not out of Landis's movies, I'd rather pick something like American Wolf in London or Blues Brothers to watch over this one, or even, Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy movies. I'm like, I'd rather pick those ones over this one. But, overall, this is still it's still fun. It's funny and interesting way for me to start seeing nudity, especially when I was like 11 or 12 years old. So that was an experience.